Hi, I am a homoracial and a member of the racist community.
What? You must be hateful and a terrible person and a piece of crap.
Why? I do not hate anyone.
You must hate black people. You are subhuman.
No, I just want to live with my own race. I am a homoracial.
What is the difference between being homoracial and racist? Are they the same?
It is similar to a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square. Both racists and homoracial people discriminate on race, but racists desire to be with more than one race but not another race. A homoracial person just wants to be with his or her own race.
But discrimination is wrong and only what hateful people do. The television told me that. I love television. I believe everything it says and consult it for my spiritual guide and believe it truly loves me back.
All discrimination means is differentiation. Someone who discriminates only differentiates between things. Discrimination is what gives us choice. It is a necessary prerequisite to choice. To be against discrimination is to necessarily be against choice. For example, being a discriminating wine aficionado is a good thing. She would like to differentiate between vintages or types of wine. Bigots tell us that discrimination is wrong because they do not want us making decisions for ourselves but only according to their bigoted beliefs. The bigots can believe and practice what they want, but we have the right to believe and practice what we want. We all discriminate when buying food in the grocery store, when differentiating between two types of beverages to buy, or discriminate among side dishes while shopping, depending if we are going to cook fish or meat for dinner. To be against discrimination is to be anti-choice.
But the television tells me that you racists are the real bigots.
The true bigots are the script writers for television and movies who say that. It would be bigoted of us to be intolerant of what others wanted to do and tell them that they can't mix with other races just because we don't want them to. But we are saying that people are free to mix with people of whatever race they like. However, some bigots on television and elsewhere are telling us that we can't associate with just our own race or the races that we prefer. Now that is bigoted on their part and is against our freedom of choice. No one of any race should have to associate with a person of another race, just because that is the personal value and belief of some bigoted TV script writer or politician. Therefore, it is they who are bigoted and intolerant of other people's racial orientation and preferences, not us. They are against us just because we don't think exactly as they do. Also, our media is replete with negative stereotypes of the racist and homoracial community. Whenever you hear, "you are a racist," the inference is that you are subhuman and incapable of logical reason and thinking for yourself, and therefore your assertions are null and void. Parts of the media, in effect, are engaging in an indoctrination of mental slavery against us with their demonizing and vilification of us, which is why tens of thousands of racist and fair-minded non-racist people alike are starting to boycott the advertisers of the offending programs. The movement is rapidly growing.
But racism and racists are what kept black people from voting during the Jim Crow era and were forcefully segregated.
Are blacks forced into segregation now?
No.
Are blacks prohibited to vote now?
No.
Are there lynch mobs now?
No.
Then why are you living in the past? We are talking about today, not a half a century ago when Jim Crow was. And slavery was abolished a century and a half ago when their ancestors lived. Should Italians and Greeks have a complex because there were slaves during the days of ancient Greece and Rome and possibly in their ancestry? How many blacks today who were born in the United States were born as slaves?
None. But you are bad because I saw on television how back in 1963 a bomb by racist people killed 4 young African American children in Birmingham, Alabama.
That tragedy did happen, and it certainly was wrong and should be condemned in the strongest terms possible. And we hear about it every year numerous times during Black History Month. But why doesn't the mainstream media talk more about a more recent attack this past summer by an anti-racist murderer, Omar Thornton, who killed numerous whites in Manchester, Connecticut at a beer distributorship where he was fired after being caught on video for stealing beer? Omar said, "I killed the 5 racists that were bothering me." If you bother someone, does that mean they have the right to kill you? Our mass media and so-called civil rights advocates are indirectly culpable in this gruesome murder with their incessant demonizing and vilification of the racist community. It is very clear that his murdering was motivated by a hatred of the racist community, and he wanted them dead for no other reason than he believed they were racist. Will the media commemorate the lost lives and memories of these innocent people who were murdered on the one-year anniversary this coming summer, like it does every year since 1963 for the African American children in Birmingham? Society has changed since then, and I wasn't even born yet back then. However, popular culture tells us that the people to hate today are members of the racist community. Also remember, whites are killed just about every day by crazy African American murderers, such as Omar Thornton, and yet the media is very reticent to show us that.
But my savior, the holy Dr. Martin Luther King, says he racists are bad and that he fought for civil rights for all of us. He is a shining example for all.
Maybe for you, but he was an instigator and provocator for us. He was imposing his personal view on the rest of the world and worked with others to force integration down the throats of Americans against their will. Yes, it is good that he caused change so black people could vote freely and fairly and without a voting tax. And yes, it is good that he made it so that blacks do not have to be separated in government-owned public forums such as buses and train stations, public libraries, etc. But no, he did very harmful and unjust things by forcing small privately owned businesses such as restaurants and hotels, against their will, to accept blacks. They were their own privately owned businesses on privately owned property and completely legal at the time. That is until King and his deep-pocketed allies lobbied Congress tremendously against the will of the majority of the American people and forced through the so-called civil rights legislation. Remember, one person's civil right can be another person's civil wrong. And no, he did very harmful things by deceiving the public into thinking that blacks were very non-violent and just as safe to be around as whites, and thus more palatable to be forcefully integrated with, when in fact the Uniform Crime Report by the FBI has shown that consistently over the past years it is much more likely for a black person to kill a white person than vice versa. The FBI data also indicate that since Martin Luther King's time in the 60s, thousands of whites have been killed by blacks.
That is Dr. Martin Luther King, not Martin Luther King.
That is another concern. It is very likely that Martin Luther King was not even qualified to have had his doctorate. Researchers have shown that his dissertation, which is required to be granted a doctorate and thus called doctor, has many plagiarized parts from writings of other people. Boston University, which granted his doctorate, conceded the striking similarities and plagiarism to other writings written before King's dissertation but let him keep the doctorate anyway. What type of example does this cheating set for our youth today? And we have a federal holiday for this man. Also, do you like John F. Kennedy?
Yes.
Well, the FBI also has a recording of Martin Luther King making a sick joke about John F. Kennedy after Kennedy was assassinated by having his head blown off. What does this say about Martin Luther King's character? Who was king to judge us? He did more civil wrongs for people than civil rights. That is when he wasn't cheating on his wife with white women.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture that Martin Luther King really was a little creepy. But he was just one person. Other people on television have said that racist people are bad, and I am still a little skeptical on the whole "I was born as a racist" thing.
It is well accepted in psychology that likes attract. That can be in numerous aspects such as a preference in type of entertainment, interests in hobbies, careers you follow, and even the race of people you associate with. Even Newsweek magazine, in citing a study in 2006 by the University of Texas's Children's Research Lab, which was written up in the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, said that babies at 6 months old differentiate, that is discriminate, by skin color. This strongly suggests that this racial orientation at such a young age is something that one is born with. At such a young age, how could a 6-month-old baby have learned to be racist already? Obviously, the baby was born that way. Newsweek, however, went further in their article to say that when the parents coerced the infants to changing their views about people of another race, from showing them videos, to talking with them, to spanking them, then the children reported a different distinction of the other race and closer to the parents' opinion. However, this just means that the child was influenced by the parent to say what the parent wanted to hear. How many homosexuals said they liked the opposite sex and dated heterosexually and denied who they really are inside, in order to please their parents? The bottom line is that our orientations, personalities and behaviors are influenced by both nurture and nature. That is, our environment when we're growing up, but also what we were born with. Even a mixed-race person can be racist by showing preference for a certain race or races over others.
So are you saying that people are influenced by both nature and nurture?
Yes, even our personalities are influenced by biology and our birth, in addition to how we are brought up.
I find that hard to believe.
It is true, and the homophobes and anti-racist hate-mongers don't want you to know it. For example, a study by Dr. Thomas Butchard, who was head of the Department of Psychology at the University of Minnesota, showed us that our genealogy and what we are born with influences very much what our personalities and behaviors are.
But I am told by the television that slavery existed in America and that blacks are very mad about it. Did slavery in fact actually happen in America?
Yes, it did.
The television also told me that something called Pearl Harbor happened in America, and at one time a guy named George Washington was president. Possibly he named himself after the area of Washington, D.C. Also, the television told me that there were two guys who in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, who conducted the first flight ever. I believe they were related to the president's former pastor Jeremiah Wright.
Let's get back to slavery for a moment and how that plays into the racist community. The people who had slaves in early America may have been greedy, they may have been exploitative and even heartless, but it is very unlikely that many of them were racist, because racists by definition are very discriminatory about the race of the people that they live among. A white racist person would most likely not want to have a black person by their home, let alone working inside and handling their children. So let us clear that up first. Second, the very first slave owner in America was a black man named Anthony Johnson, which dated to even before the Revolutionary War. Subsequent to the war, the United States was formed and the Constitution differentiated between free people and slaves, not white people and blacks. As a matter of fact, even many white males did not have the right to vote in the way beginning because only property owners had the right to vote. In addition, during the slavery years in the United States, many blacks owned slaves. We know this from when recently state governments required an audit of insurance companies and their racial insurance policies in order to do business in their state. The insurance companies complied and found, much to everyone's surprise, that many blacks were slave owners too. We can talk more about the very active pro-slavery role that many black people played during slavery and the active role they played back in Africa, because I am a racist and we do pay extra attention to race in history and life, but that is for another conversation.